Welcome, Vistage members and guests. I'm Dave Nelson, a 13-year Vistage member based in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, part of CE 676. And today, your Fridays with Vistage host. We're discussing strategic plans gone bad, 5 ways to fix your focus. And our expert guest today is Deborah Fell. Hey, Deborah, welcome to Fridays with Vistage.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let me give a quick introduction so people know a little bit more about you. Deborah is a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of Chief Outsiders, and an expert at helping companies identify where the opportunities are, whether through strategic planning or alignment activities or productivity increases or just modernization of your marketing efforts or your organization. And Deborah helps these companies develop and implement more actionable and effective strategies. She describes herself as an outsourced CMO with 30-plus years of strategic and tactical marketing experience, including as the Senior Vice President Global Marketing at Marriott International, which, by the way, is an awesome company, and a division manager at AT&T, where, by the way, I worked for 12 years myself, so very cool common background. In recent years, Deborah has leveraged her strong strategy and implementation skills to help mid-sized businesses, that's Vistage, to help them and also to mentor startups across numerous industries, including healthcare, insurance, technology, food service, and my favorite craft, brewing. Awesome, Deborah. And by the way, she's based out of Washington, D.C. Now, folks, if you have questions as we do the webinar today, please type them in the WebEx Q&A panel, and we'll take as many as we can at the end. And by the way, we're going to do 2 live surveys, so be ready to go on those. So, Deborah, let's talk about strategic plans gone bad.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dave. You know, in strategic planning, there's really no middle ground. People either appreciate the inspiration and just the opportunity to talk about and plan for the future of the business, or they dread it. It is a lot of work if it becomes just a forecasting exercise. And I actually heard someone describe it once that it's weeks of thought bubbles and spreadsheets to create a dusty document that sometimes is really leading nowhere. And from what I've seen over the years, what's often missing is any form of implementation or execution planning. And what people fail to realize is that strategy without execution is hallucination. Strategy without execution is hallucination. So I'd like to understand what your confidence level is in your implementation plan. We've got a quick poll here. Dave. We've got a quick poll here that asks the question.
Sorry about that. I was muted. I am unmuted, so
okay.
Folks,
no problem.
We're going to deal with it. How confident are you in the implementation of your strategic plan? And you've got 5 choices there, anywhere from below 50% up to 100%, or maybe you're unsure. So let us know what your thought is, and Deborah, I'll jump in with results as soon as we've got them in. You've got a few more seconds to answer.
Okay, great. So, and this is really, you know, as we'll see what the results are in a little bit. But even if you were, you know, very sure on your implementation, feel totally confident about it, as most of you know, it isn't one and done. It isn't just that you make sure, you know, you check on your implementation and then you step away. So it's this constant vigilance, if I could say that, on developing and monitoring and revisiting and reevaluating the implementation of the plan. If you're less sure, and 75, 50%, or so unsure that you've actually already sent an email out to your executive team saying we got to talk about this, that's okay, because we're going to talk about some best practices.
Here's the answer, and I guess not surprisingly, only 5% of people said they are 100% confident in that plan. About half the people said they're 75% confident, and 29% were sort of middle, 50-50. And then 12% fell below that level, with 2% just not quite sure. So that probably is not a shocking result to you, is it, Deborah?
No, it isn't at all. And at any point in time, this actually might be a little bit different depending on where you are in the planning cycle. But the good news is we're going to be talking about implementations and best practices. I've kind of identified what could be some helpful game changers to make sure we get implementation of the strategic plan versus have a hallucination. But there's another side of the coin, and that is that my screen has actually frozen here, so bear with me just a second, everyone.
It's technology, so we're just going to have a little bit of fun with it, aren't we, Deborah?
I love it.
Looking good on this end, starting to move again.
Good. Execution without strategy, on the other hand, makes for some very expensive random acts. And often this is when we get called in at Chief Outsiders, because the CEO is seeing that they're spending money and spending time, but they're not necessarily seeing the results that they want. And they want to understand, is it the activities? Is it the strategy? What is it? And often what I find is that the strategies can be so high level that you could actually put any initiative or any tactic in it. So part of the key is to create actionable strategies in the first place. So the purpose of this webinar is to really develop practical tools, talk about pragmatic approaches that can help you develop and implement your strategic growth plan. And a key to this is you, the CEO, or the president. And I've actually designed this webinar specifically for you because your strategic leadership and ownership is really key at both ends of this process. As Dave mentioned, at the beginning, although maybe he didn't say this part, that I have over 30 years of experience as an operational executive. I'm not a lifetime consultant, as you heard. And I've run a profit and loss statement for Ecolab, which is a business-to-business mid-sized company in the Midwest. And then, as Dave mentioned, division manager AT&T and senior vice president of global marketing for Marriott International. And with those industries, and now as a consultant over the years, I've been involved in a lot of strategic plans. And in my experience, there are 5 simple areas of focus that can really make a difference in your plan, in your execution, and in your results. But, the elephant in the room may be, so why should you care? I'm sure those of you on the phone already have a growth number in mind. So think of a growth number and consider the value of a well-informed and well-articulated strategy. What would it do for your company? Could it help you double your business in 3 years? I actually heard this the other day, what you see on the screen, that if you improve revenue by 2% per month, you'll double your business in 3 years. And I had to actually go do the math because I didn't believe it. And actually, it's a little bit more than doubles the business. But it is astounding that if you think about, you set the growth plan, whatever yours may be, let's just say double your business, and then you look for, what do I need to track towards every month? And then the strategy becomes, how do I get there? And then what are the tactics in order to execute that? So it is about the goal, having actionable strategies, and then being able to track towards that goal and also create visibility around that. So what's the value of a strategic plan? So what I'd like you to do is to consider these 5 factors, and I wrote them in the form of questions, and these also represent the agenda for the rest of this webinar. But these 5 factors that can help ensure the strategy is both actionable and gets executed, both pieces. I believe that all 5 have equal value, and that if you consider, okay, what's the full potential for my business of building and executing the strategy to win, the perfect strategy for my business, that it won't reach its full contribution value unless these are followed. So think about the impact of developing better, more clear goals, more actionable strategies, and a clear implementation roadmap. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, you may ask why the focus on your role as CEO or president or, founder, leader of the business. Why aren't we just handing this off to finance or to a marketing person? Because this isn't simply a forecasting exercise. It's fundamental to the growth of your revenue and actually the engagement of your team, certainly your reputation in the market and your overall health as a business. A big part of what we do at Chief Outsiders is to help companies develop their strategic growth and implementation plans. In fact, our CEO, Art Saxby, and our principal, Pete Hayes, actually wrote a book called Growth Gears. And many of you who registered, hopefully you took me up on opting in so you can get a free copy of the Growth Gears book. But what this book basically does is walk through how to really develop a strategic plan and an implementation plan. But the fact is that the leadership and direct involvement of the CEO is crucial, because even if we're involved, it's not our plan. It's a plan owned and led by you and your executive team. So what we're talking about is going into the roots of the business, the low ground, where what can't be seen but has the major impact on how healthy your business really is. My Chief Outsiders colleagues would be laughing at me at this point, because lately I've been, developing a lot of things and content, et cetera, and really using apple trees as a metaphor or a theme. But in apple trees, deep tap roots can go down as far as 9 feet, and they enable these trees to stay strong even in times of drought. So strong roots make a difference in good times and bad, and we all have and surely will continue to endure and enjoy, both sides of that coin. So grab a pen and a pad of paper and prepare to jot a few notes as we go. So here we go. What do you stand for? What we're going to do here is get rid of the marketing jargon. We can talk about positioning and all this other stuff later on, but what do you stand for? And to clarify, the question is, what does your brand stand for, or what does your business stand for? But this is personal, because you are either the owner or founder or standing in that place on behalf of the owners. And, it's interesting. I was with a startup just last week, and they were trying to decide whether they wanted to be the voice of the brand or not. And I said, we'll talk about that. That's a good question, an important question. But regardless of what you decide, everything you do or don't do is resoundingly speaking for and representing this brand. So what do you stand for? Jot down a word, a phrase, what just immediately comes to mind. Don't reach for the PowerPoint or the agency or the marketing deck. Just what do you stand for? And just make a couple notes here. Now, you may be wondering why these graphics are on the slide. So just to warm up to this, I don't know if you've ever been to, Portland, Oregon, and stood in the midst of the bonsai trees in the Japanese garden there, or been to Japan, as I've done on a couple of business trips, and gone to the gardens. And these bonsai trees just give such an incredible sense of harmony, and they stand for harmony. They represent harmony. The redwood trees, if you go to the California redwood forest and you just look up, it looks like those trees go on forever, and that's in fact what they stand for. And the apple tree stands for healthiness, and you can tell the level of their health by the fruit that they bear. So what do you stand for in a word or a phrase? Perhaps more helpful to you are some industry examples. And I haven't worked with or for Volvo, which you see on the bottom right there, but pretty much anybody you ask could tell you that Volvo stands for safety, or an automobile company that stands for safety. They could name the company for the most part. I worked with a couple of healthcare companies, and one, when I first went to visit them, I had this conversation, what do you stand for? And their first answer was, we provide the best coverage at the lowest cost. So I said, hold on, put the product and the service aside for a second, because you stand for more than what you sell. So if you've written down something that has to do with your product or service, set that aside for a second. And what is it that you stand for that causes you to make those choices? What do you stand for? I worked a little bit with a IT services firm, and they said we stand for best quality IT services. And, show me a website that doesn't say quality service, but let's let's step back and think about what is it that you really stand for. And in this case, the pain point for their target customers, which were CIOs, Chief Information Officers, is that the resources consumed by legacy systems and business units, the resources that the legacy systems that they had to spend on legacy systems, kept them from really being able to do a lot of the projects that the business units needed or that the rest of the company needed. So that the business at some level had moved on and different departments were actually doing their own technology projects. And part of the reason they were doing that was because their millennial teams were getting frustrated, and some of them were opting out of the company. So this was kind of a long way to get there, but where they landed was what we really stand for ourselves and for our clients, is being able to acquire and retain best talent. And the last one is a startup in stealth. And they are essentially, when I met with them, they said, we stand for better GPS services. And when we really got into it, their target customers were these drivers and, package deliverers who already have their GPS systems paid for by the company, but they actually are willing to pay out of their own pocket so they could have road superiority, so they could have the better, fastest, know the most information. And they wanted to be the go-to person for other drivers. So the company stands for road superiority. So that hopefully just gives you a sense of what I'm really looking for here and a way to think about it. Let's go on to then, who do you serve? And you will notice that I couldn't really talk about what you stand for without bringing the customer in. And that's what this question is. Who's your core customer? Met with a CEO not that long ago, and they said, hey, what do you think of our website? And so I went on their website, and I found what I frequently find, and that is there are great product displays, lots of features and benefits, a lot about what we, the company, are, our awards, our products, our services, our technologies, all these things are expressed and, colorfully and beautifully. But I'm often not sure what is the pain point you're solving for what customer, because it's so much about the brand. It's so much about the company. At the end of the day, your customers don't really care what you do, whether your customers are distributors, clients, CIOs, or working moms, whoever they are, they don't care what you do. They only care about what you do for them. So understanding what do they care about, what do they want beyond the aperture of what you're trying to sell them. Many times when we're doing research, when we're thinking about our customer, we're only focused on that client or that customer through the narrow aperture of what are we trying to sell them. And in doing so, we can sell both them and yourself short. So jot down just for a second, who is your core customer? Is it a CIO? Is it a distributor? Is it stores? Is it consumers? End consumers. Just a phrase that describes your consumer. Because we're going to work on this just a little bit during the webinar. Because it's important for you to have better insight into their world and really understand their motivations and beliefs in the context of your industry. And so let's talk for a second about it's more than a philosophy. It's really distinguishing the difference between insights and data and facts. So there's lots of data that you get, lots of facts that you get, but a piece of data does not necessarily equal an insight. When we're talking about customer insights, we need to understand how do you sort of source that data or actually pull some intuition and some judgment into that data to really understand the motivation, the beliefs, and the behaviors. Again, all within the context of your industry, and look at a series of facts in order to discern patterns, or what are the meanings from which you can inform your strategy? Let me put this into a bit of a model and give you an example of what I mean by this. When I'm talking about an insight, I'm talking about a deep truth that informs strategy. And one way to remember this approach that we're about to go through is if you take the word insight and divide it in two, and think about in as what's inside the consumer's mind and heart and will. What are their beliefs? What are their motivations vis-a-vis your industry? And sight, think about that in terms of what you can see them do. So if you're a distributed product in a store, then you can go in and actually observe consumers interacting with your brand. Or in a B2B perspective, you can ride along on a sales call and go see decision-making in action. If you can't do either of those things, then you may have to ask. But one way to just think about this is that the behaviors are things that come from what you can see and actions that you can observe the customer taking. So what do you do with this model? Let's go back to the IT services company, remember, which stood for best talent. A few data and facts in this scenario was that CIOs' budgets were declining or flat over time, while other departments were actually increasing their spending on technology and related services. And another fact was that 40% of IT spending was actually outside of CIO control. An additional fact was that 50% or more of the CIO's IT budgets were tied to maintaining legacy systems or some other form of traditional IT projects. And the CIOs at the budget tables were sort of forced to choose between maintenance and risk management versus innovation. Meantime, the rest of the business felt like IT was more the obstacle in the way of innovation, and what the rest of the business was doing was going off and funding their own IT projects. So what was happening was that there was a lot of angst going on in the business, and what the IT services company was able to sort of sort through in talking to their clients, looking at data and information and facts, be able to sort of look at what are the beliefs of their direct client, again, which are the CIOs. The CIOs believe that other departments doing IT or technology projects could actually create unintended consequences with their independent projects. And the motivations behind CIOs' behaviors were that they were focusing on security and risk management. The behaviors that played out were that the CIOs were trying to gain even greater control or even shut down what they might consider to be rogue IT. And so this was the insight was this really observing what was going on. So the IT services company had a couple of choices. One, they could offer their services at a reduced cost to the CIO, thereby freeing up more budget perhaps, and maybe the IT services company would get more business. Or they could sort of tread this fine line between selling to the CIO and continuing that relationship as well as getting business from other parts of the organization. Or they could develop strategies for solutions that provided oversight for the business that was actually led by the CEOs, along with some collaboration tools and more flexible solutions. And that's the route that they chose. Those were the strategies that they employed in their business. So just to give you a sense of how you can take data and facts and develop a deeper truth about what's going on and what can be important to your direct client and to their business. One other example is a little different. It's in the consumer space. It was a healthcare company. One of their, which you recall, stood for A Future for Children. A key segment that they were focused on was low-income single mothers with children who also care about the future for their children. A few facts were that a large percentage of moms said in research that they simply couldn't afford healthcare insurance. Another fact was that 20% or more of low-income single mothers with children actually don't have the insurance. what meaning can you possibly give this? Is there a pattern or is there a meaning here? Would you say she doesn't care about her children? No, you wouldn't say that. Because moms believed and felt that the best way to provide a future for their children was to put a roof over their heads, clothes on their back, food in their belly. So her motivation was to take care of the kids. And that's what caused her behavior not to take health insurance. So again, if you're the healthcare company, do you reduce price for her? No. What this actually led to, by thinking this through and developing this insight about mom, was to develop some highly actionable strategies whereby it was two-pronged. First of all, educate mom that if she doesn't get preventive health care for herself and her kids and something happens to her, that's a problem for the children, or they could potentially develop a lifetime of medical issues that require attention. So the education is really about you can't afford not to have this health care. So essentially reframing this for mom. And then secondly, developing strategies to deliver programs that included budgeting tools for mom and other resources and support. So you get the idea. A couple of very different examples how leverage data and facts in a framework like this can help create customer insight and actionability. And this can be used if you have distributors or in other types of businesses as well. So I focus on this because insights are like big fish. If you want small fish, stay in the shallow water. That's where all the competition is, fishing around with the exact same set of data and facts. But if you want the big fish, you've got to go deeper. You've got to frame the information a little bit differently to develop those insights. So let's move on to the next question. What is your competitor's plan to win? And you'll note I'm not saying, does your competitor have a plan to win? What is your competitor's plan to win? Think about how do companies typically look at the competition? You know, you collect data, number of salespeople, sales and marketing spend, what geographic markets, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is some of these indicators or data points are actually not at all helpful. So my recommendation to you is that you actually identify someone in the organization to develop a plan to beat you, to actually create the plan to beat you, and then bring it into your executive meeting, go over the plan, and at a minimum, you will identify specific risks, and once you identify it, you can better manage that risk. In a best case, you can come up with innovations or maybe even better ways. So I really encourage you to write this point down and actually, you know, whether you're at the beginning of your strategic planning cycle or somewhere along the way, if you haven't done that, to take a look at competition from a more actionable point of view versus looking at the usual and customary indicators that most people look for. And I kind of want to talk about this piece. This is a bit of an aside, mind you, but this is true beyond thinking about customer insight, true beyond thinking about your competition, that there's a lot of data and facts that we collect. And some of it's useful and some of it's not. Even in the world of forecasting, many of you are familiar with Alan and Brian Bolio of ITR Economics. You know, they've been in economic forecasting for a very long time. And in fact, we use them at Chief Outsiders, and I know many of you in Vistage do as well. In their most recent ITR Economic Trends report, in fact, I just read it, the headline was, "Don't be led astray." And this was in the context of their projection that the U.S. economy will continue to improve this year and into 2017. They pointed out that some of the indicators people are looking at are actually not helpful in economic forecasting, just like sales, how much spend, geographic footprint, number of stores you might look at in developing competitive strategy, that you want to be aware of them, you want to track them, but they may not really inform the task at hand. So they're all in the same discussion of what kind of information and facts do you look for. And there's also, back to competition, there's another way to look at competition, and that is, how would you disrupt you? How would you disrupt yourself? So we're all familiar with Uber. Let me go back a slide. Got a little ahead of myself. Sorry about that. But there's another kind of disruption that you can do without necessarily inventing a new business. I had a recent client that was a beverage company. One of the most informative conversations I had was with their top distributors. And that's part of what we do at Chief Outsiders is if we come in, we get an outside-in view of the company by talking to competitors, talking to customers, talking to stakeholders. And in this case, I was also speaking to distributors. This is a hyper-competitive industry, hundreds of competitors coming online each day. And consumers, the customers, the consumers of the product have an insatiable demand for new products. And it creates quite a bit of chaos in the industries, for stores, for distributors, for sure. And my client's distributors said the following, that if my client could figure out how to actually develop turnkey on-time launches for them, and think of this as in a package. So a package with everything wrapped up in a bow arrives for distributors well in advance with here's the strategy, here's the pricing, here's the cases, here's what the labels look like, here's the point of purchase, here's the marketing plan, the whole thing tied up in a bow. If this company could deliver that to them, which nobody else is doing, all my client would have to do is have their sales team give the distributor their quotas, and they will deliver. So what does that actually have to do with disruption? Think about it. Suddenly, other beverage companies could be experiencing relative softness and not have a clue why, because of their competitive tracking, and what they're looking for is the usual and customary data, number of salespeople, geographies, how much advertising, all that stuff. So it's kind of like best supply chain in a way, which can be one of the greatest disruptors. It's really challenging to get there. And if you've read or you read the Growth Gears book, Art and Pete talk about that a study was conducted with the university, and what it revealed, they were trying to understand what companies grow well and grow faster than others and why. And one of the key things they learned was that well-run companies often have the hardest time growing. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense because they're so focused in running that company so well. And so in order to be a disruptor, like we've just been talking about, you actually have to be a well-run company. But if you take a strategy like that, it becomes extremely tough to catch up. Because not only do you gain greater leverage and efficiency out of your existing operations and assets, but you also win the loyalty of distributors, your direct customers, by delivering for them so that they can build their business, so they help the stores be more successful. And it's really all about helping your customers and their customers be more successful. So the fifth question is about who's on board, because you need to know that you're surrounded with those on the same mission as you are. A discussion with your executive team on what you stand for is essential. The exercise that we did at the very beginning when I asked you, what do you stand for? I'd urge you to actually, at your next staff meeting, have everybody write down individually, in a word or a short phrase, what does the company stand for? What does the brand stand for? And then go around the room and have them share. It's going to tell you a lot about what's driving their decisions on a day-to-day basis. Roy Disney, who was the lesser-known Walt Disney Company co-founder, once said, when you know what you stand for, decision-making is easy. And what's playing out on a day-to-day basis is actions driven out of either a level of alignment or lack of alignment on your mission and on what you stand for. I believe the next slide is, yes, this was the recent Vistage CEO Confidence Index. And one of the key questions, and this is actually your responses that I'm showing you across the Vistage CEO team, and that is, what's the centerpiece of your growth plan? 73% of you said in either new markets and or products. But that one of the biggest impediments to executing the strategic plan had to do with alignment issues. So let's do another poll. And Dave, if you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted this time.
All right. Take it away.
Let's jump in. So, folks, you should see the polling box now having popped onto the screen. And the question is, what best describes the alignment of your executive team? And you've got 5 choices that are from well-aligned to not well-aligned or somewhere along that continuum. So please pick one of the 5. And, Deborah, as soon as the survey results are back, I'll jump back in.
Fantastic. And this is an important question, and it really is a point in time. And it's just a gut check. You know, some of you may be thinking, on some things we're aligned, on some things we're not aligned, and that may be neutral. You know, maybe that's what you consider neutral. But just what's your gut check on how well aligned you are, broadly speaking, with regard to your strategic plan, where you're going, how you plan to get there. And you've got, I think the results are up, Dave?
They are. They just posted. So it looks like we actually have a pretty strong group on the webinar today. So a third of the people said well-aligned, and then just under half the people said somewhat aligned. We had 7% at neutral, 7% at somewhat not aligned, and 9% at not well-aligned.
Okay, great. So if you are at neutral or through not well aligned, never fear. We're going to focus here in just a minute on some tips and some things that you can do to increase alignment. If you're well aligned and somewhat aligned, which is fantastic, and with well aligned obviously being what we really want. Again, it's a point in time, and the vigilance around that is critical. So I think the tips will be helpful to you as well. But there is one other point on this with regard to alignment. You may have like total and complete alignment, but I want to make sure that that what we're talking about is, and again, the screen froze, bear with me. And this just gives me a chance to make this point more powerfully, that we're not talking about taking that middle of the road stand that everybody can agree to. And Margaret Thatcher had this famous quote that standing in the middle of the road gets you knocked down on both sides. Standing in the middle of the road gets you knocked down on both sides. So we're not talking about that middle of the road position that everybody can agree to. We're talking about locking arms on the strategic plan and on the implementation plan on where and how we're taking this business. As polarizing as she was, and as much debate there still is to Margaret Thatcher's legacy, she was certainly decisive and action-oriented. There's another side of this coin, though, and I love this Will Rogers quote: even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. So you don't want to confuse alignment with actions. And, I used to think this was a big company thing. But then as I worked with small business and mid-sized businesses, it's almost like when you have more than one person, alignment can become an issue, or in terms of action, one person thinks somebody else has the ball. So it's critical to really focus on first alignment and then action. And I have some big alignment tips. First of all is plan ownership. Your executive and others on your team need to own the whole plan. And so what I'm talking about here is not just their piece of it, not department and silos. While individuals and departments are responsible for getting things done, it's about coming together as a team, that if the whole plan doesn't get done, then that doesn't work for the business. So plan ownership by the team. Secondly, you as the leader of your business also want to probe across your organization. Does everybody understand how their work ties to the goals? Whether it's the accounting manager, the front desk, the factory worker, or the salesperson, do they understand how the work they do day in and day out ties to the goals of the business? And you also need engagement champions. You're the biggest champion. Your executive team and whoever else you designate should be looking for and recognizing what's being done that's progressing the plan. Everybody knows the simple stoplight dashboard where you're looking for alignment and action on what are we progressing on, what are the big things that we're pursuing, and that we're all on board with making those happen and measuring them. I'm sure that you have all heard this story that relates to the stoplight dashboard, but I heard it directly from Alan Mulally in the boardroom at Ford Motor Company. I was with his Chief Marketing Officer, Jim Farley, and a couple of other people, and that was it. And we sat down, and he shared with me that when he first came to the company, he looked in the employee parking lot. What he saw told him, we don't have alignment because there's not very many Fords there, and we may also have a red signal on quality. And most of you know the story. You know, he traveled the world to really understand where are we, and then he worked with his team to develop their plan to win. And then he began to meet with his, executive team, going around the table, and he would ask each of them to kind of report, on where things are, and they would each hold up this index size card and report whether they were green, yellow, or red on their big initiatives. Initially, they were all green. Sooner or later, somebody showed yellow, and one day, at the far end of the table, somebody showed a red. And everybody whipped around to look at Alan. And what did he do? You know the rest of the story. He started to clap because somebody was being honest and transparent and not sort of positioning themselves in the sense of, we don't need to worry the boss about this, we can fix this. But that honesty on the part of that individual and Alan's response set new tone and team alignment. So the last question here is around implementation. How synchronized is the implementation? Is it synchronized with the plan, consistent with the plan? Is it consistent for the customer? And you see these birds flying in formation because you have all kinds of things happening across your company that need to come together and show up like it needs to show up for the customer. And you also need to be resourced for success. So let's talk about this issue of resource. In fact, in the recent CEO Confidence Index, the biggest impediment highlighted by the CEOs, in fact, 48% of you said our biggest impediment is resources. So let's look at what I think are some implementation game changers, and I've actually seen this over the years. And the first headline on this is that you need to create implementation as a discipline. And I don't mean a department. I just mean as a discipline throughout the organization. And here are some ways to do that. Create implementation plans. And I will say that the strategic plan is not done until the implementation plan is done. What will happen when, by whom, to what end, at what cost? And what's the definition of success? All before you get started. The second area relates to budgets and this whole issue of resources. I was with a new client and they said, you're going to want to look at the strategy. And I said, you know what? I want to look at the budget first. So I looked at the budget and I said, I think your strategy is A and B and C, to which they replied, that's not the strategy. And I said, well, that's interesting because 80% of your budget is actually being spent on these things. So I recommend you look at your budgets and compare them to your strategies. If I analyzed your budget, could I guess your strategies correctly? The other thing is to develop a wall of fame. This is a best practice that I have done and I promote. Pick a wall. Could be between your admin offices in the factory or a central work area, and make it visible. Put examples of your brand in action on the wall and see if it's the brand you want to stand for. and if it all works together. Examples, and you can, make some notes of what you might put on the wall, a screenshot of your mobile site, if you have point of purchase or labels, maybe even your customer service script, or how about a few slides from your client presentation and step back and look at it. Does it appear to be the brand you want to be? And last but not least, in the customer area, be a customer. You can ride along with a salesperson, or if your product is distributed, go to the store and really just observe consumers interacting with your brand. And then listen to customers directly. Call a customer. As a president or CEO of your business, I'm sure they'll take the call. And I'd also recommend you call customers who maybe have fired you or didn't renew. The fact of the matter is, every day, all of your resources are being fully deployed. People, machines, money. Are they executing fully against the plan? And against an implementation that's effective, seamless, and consistent for the customer. So these are the 5 questions, and what we've really been working through within these questions are 5 ways to fix your focus and address your implementation, which is one of the key concerns you as CEOs identified in a recent Vistage survey. And from what I've seen, studied, and experienced over the years is that once you get that clarity of focus and alignment, you have a better chance of great execution and a better shot at achieving your objectives. Now, whether you can achieve a 15 points of growth versus your competition, or a 1-point share gain at a time when the rest of the industry is flat, as I've experienced with companies I've worked with, I can't guarantee that. But what I can guarantee is this: there's a 100% chance you won't hit a goal you haven't developed or created clarity around, or created an implementation plan for, and that you will develop better goals through more effective strategic planning. So I hope that you'll consider these 5 factors to help ensure the strategy you take the time to develop gets executed, and that you achieve the full contribution value of an effective strategic plan and a clear implementation roadmap. And before I turn it back over to Dave, and before we go to questions, I just want to thank, first of all, the team at Vistage for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and for the immense help along the way, and also those of you who have tuned in that you've got. I hope you've gotten value, and I want to thank you for tuning into Strategies Gone Bad, 5 Ways to Fix Your Focus. Dave?
All right. Thank you, Deborah. I will just, in case anybody is listening to this after the fact, recording only, and wants to get in touch with you, folks, if you're looking at your screen, you can see this, but Deborah Fell, CMO at Chief Outsiders, and she shared her phone number there, 240-494-6404. And Deborah, your email address, do you want to share that as well?
Sure. It's dsfell at chiefoutsiders.com, and actually the website, chiefoutsiders.com.
Perfect. Now, let's jump into the Q&A. And folks, this interface that we're seeing today might be a little unfamiliar to you. So to access the Q&A chat panel, you'll see in the center of your screen, right near the top, it says View Deborah Fell's Desktop. If you hover over that, it pulls down your WebEx control buttons, and over on the right-hand side is one of the buttons that says Options. And if you click that, it actually opens up your Q&A panel, and you can type a question. So, Deborah, let's loop back around. I thought the idea of tasking someone in the organization with developing a plan to beat you, and also the question about, what could disrupt you, very interesting. Who would that be in the organization, or do people ever bring in outsiders to do that kind of a analysis? It's a really intriguing idea.
You can. I mean, you could certainly bring in outsiders to do that. I think there's a lot of value of really thinking that through internally as well. And you could, this could be something where you could actually put a sales and marketing person together, maybe along with, if you do have an IT lead, because I think those three folks represent a lot of what other people's organizations would be using in order to develop that plan to beat you, right? Sales, marketing, and your technology. So I might recommend 2 or 3 people, or you could just say, you know what, we've got some, and I would also, I wouldn't necessarily make this folks on your executive team. Folks throughout your organization have a lot of ideas on how things could be better, and some of them may be the ones actually battling with the competition on a day-to-day basis. So I would think sales, marketing, IT, but there may just be some bright stars in your organization that could do a great job of coming up with a plan.
Okay, cool. Let's actually zoom up to the higher level and thinking about so many Vistage companies that sell business to business. They've never really been forced to be great at marketing. And Geraldine actually posted the question. I don't know if that's her situation or not, but she says if you're starting from scratch, who should participate in developing a strategic plan?
Well, when we say starting from scratch, are we saying we're a startup?
No. I think I'll assume that we're talking about, just given our audience, we're talking about a business that is, heads down operating day to day, but has never really thought about the larger issues and, hasn't been doing strategic planning. So who do you involve in a process like that?
I suggest that it is really you as the leader of your business and those that you consider to be your executive team. And you can certainly get, outside resources to help facilitate and guide you through that process. But it's really and a lot of it is outlined in the growth gears, an incredibly useful tool to step back and think about the customer. Who is our customer? What is it that we stand for? And actually, a lot of the things that I've been walking through are really also guides to help you develop a plan. And part of the question that I heard was also around sales and marketing. Am I correct on that, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The core. And so in that regard, it's really kind of understanding what is the pain point? What is the real need that your customer has? And when you really understand what needs they have, and how you can fill it, and as you fill it, what does that help your customer, your client do? And I think the example that I gave with the CIO was really understanding the customer of your customer. So I think it's starting with certainly understanding the company. And in the Growth Gears book, and part of what we do is we go in and help companies understand what are their strengths, weaknesses within the company, right? Because you want to be clear on, what are your competencies, what are you good at, and then if you have some gaps, how do you think about sort of filling those in? What are the threats? And this is kind of it could be competition, or it could be a gap you have, right? That actually you create a threat for yourself. Even those are mostly externally driven. And then what's the opportunity space for you in terms of how you want to grow? But what's that goal? What's the perspective on the company? What's insight about the customer? What's insight about the competition? And then knowing that, how will we achieve our goal? How can we achieve our goal? And then what are the sales and marketing strategies in order to help us develop the leads, develop the business? And then what's the buyer's journey? Our clients, what is their process for actually buying? And how do we then market in a way and sell to them in a way that really is tied to their buyer's journey, and ultimately getting that business and meeting that need, delivering for them to get repeat business or referral business is the best form of marketing that anyone can do.
I like your framing on, focusing on the customer and their needs. I've heard it said often around the Vistage universe that everybody listens to the same radio station, WIIFM, which is an acronym that stands for what's in it for me, right? But we forget this when we build our websites and we're talking about our products and look at all these awesome benefits and look at how we're different, and we've forgotten that WIIFM. So great framing on that. I want to loop around to a question that Joy has posted, and folks, we do have a couple minutes here, so get your questions in by hovering over the green button in the upper center and pick the drop down for the Q&A panel if you haven't done that already. So you told the story about reviewing an organization's budget to see how they were actually allocating their dollars and how that misaligned with their claim strategy. Do you see that often? And Joy goes on to ask, how may an executive guide a process to revise the strategy and planning and implementation and execution? So what are your thoughts on both the frequency of that misalignment and then the process?
I do see it often. And it's easy to get excited about what we need to do to grow. And when you think about the Vistage, the CEO index, where the centerpiece is new products and new markets, think about that. You have a base of business. You already have a base of business. Chances are you don't have a lot of extra resources just sitting around, right? And now the center of your growth is going to be new products and markets, which are a huge load on resources. And the big missing piece, and in fact, I should cook this into this presentation, the big missing piece is we need to sometimes decide what we're not going to do. What are we going to stop doing? If things in our base is not going to be contributing to the future of our business, just because we've been doing it doesn't mean we need to continue to do it. So I think sometimes part of the how-tos on this, Joy, is choosing what not to do. But that seems so incredibly hard for businesses. But I do see it often, and I think the guidance that I would give you is look at this from 2 points of view. One is you have a goal, you know where you are, you know where here is, you know where you're going in terms of your growth goal, and what do you need to do to get there, and how much is that going to cost? And this is where the implementation plan can be helpful, both in terms of people resources and budgets. And then if you go, then you can also start from the reverse, the complete other side of the coin, and say, how do we develop what we need to develop to achieve the goal, and then look backwards from the goal. So that was not a clear response. Hopefully you knew what I was trying to tell you, but let me just repeat it again for clarity's sake, is determining what's your growth goal, what does it take to get there in terms of people and budget resources. So you've got that. And then also looking at how do you want to grow month on month, but you also, as part of this, have to have a base of business. And what is the time and people resources that it takes to continue to run your base of business? And when you add those two things up and see, we got a problem, that's when you've got to make those choices. Is it something we've been doing that's got to go away? Or is there something we want to do that it maybe we can do it, but we just can't do it in this time horizon? That would be my counsel to you.
Okay. And by the way, that question, what do we stop doing? I think that is, I agree with you, it's hard, but I think it's incredibly important.
It is. And I can't believe that I didn't have it in here already. So
well, I would definitely add it.
For the question.
I would definitely add it, because Margaret actually was asking a similar question. I didn't even get a chance to voice it to you before you went to the answer, but I got a chance to see Steve Jobs talking to his team 6 weeks into his return at Apple, and he said, folks, we've reviewed the roadmap, and we're doing too many things, not enough focus. We've cut 70% of it. And that was the secret to the Apple turnaround. But I think all of us, we have to look at what we can stop doing. One last question. And we're right at the top of the hour, so I'll ask you just to answer this as briefly as you can. Sure. Drew is asking, is there a specific strategic plan template that you like, that you found to be highly effective and that incorporates the elements that you've discussed today?
Yes, and actually it's called growth gears. I mean, there's a longer answer to this question that may be another webinar. But
we'll have to come back again, Deborah.
We'll have to come back again. But I would say if you go to the growth gears, there's a lot of great template in there, just practical and strategic advice and tools that could be very helpful to you.
All right. Well, I'm sure we could go on a lot longer. This was fabulous, very thought-provoking. So, Deborah Fell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And everybody, we're going to come back at you. Boom, boom. Join us again next Friday. We're going to be diving deep into asset protection strategies. And then the Friday after that, August 26th, improve your sales team's health and performance. So it's an August of Vistage, Fridays with Vistage webinars. As always, you can register at vistage.com/FWV, as in Fridays with Vistage, and that's a public site. So you can invite your colleagues, friends, coworkers, and you can also access the recordings of these sessions once you're logged into Vistage at vistage.com/webinars, generally posted by the middle of the first week following the event. So look for this one next Wednesday. With that, on behalf of Deborah Fell and the entire team at Vistage International, I'm Dave Nelson. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great weekend.